Well, good morning, everybody, to you. We are continuing in our study in the book of Micah as we continue in our book overview series. And I hope that's been a blessing to you. It's been such a blessing to me. There's passages that you just don't see very often. And this morning's kind of one of those. I can't remember the last time I heard a teaching out of the book of Micah, but has been a true joy to study it this week. And so for those of you who are not aware of this, I'm not sure that I ever clued in on this or ever heard anybody say this, but the book of Micah is interesting. Micah uses puns. So I'm sure he was good at dad jokes, and I just shared a couple of just great puns with everybody in person before we began this morning. It was a German pun. I'm sure everybody would want to hear it, right? I mean, it's just fantastic. Do you guys know out there? These guys know because I just told them. Do you guys know? Have you heard about German sausage? You heard about this? It's the worst. It's the worst. So that joke reminds me of the meteorologist who tried to catch fog. Have you heard about that? He tried to catch fog, but he missed. He missed fog. So there's a lot. So you're welcome. I mean, hey, you come back. I'm here all week. Micah is filled with puns. If you liked that, you're gonna love this hour. If you didn't like that, then still hang around. But welcome to all those of you who are joining us this morning. And we are just gonna have a great time in the book of Micah this morning. If you would like a handout this morning, like everybody else in person gets, you can sign up for our newsletter at our website, Bible4.family. It is free. You'll get emailed the handouts every week. And right now, I believe Sarah's going to post that on YouTube. So if you're watching YouTube live, you can go there, and she's posting a link. You can click on that and have the handouts to see what everybody else here is seeing. Book of Micah. Let's get started this morning. Thank you, everybody, for your prayers for True Grace and for your support of our ministry. We are so thankful for all of you. And please keep us in prayer as we attempt to minister to people throughout the week and answer Bible questions and counsel and pray with folks. So please be in prayer for that as the Lord uses this ministry. We're in the book of Micah this morning, as I stated, and let's go ahead and get started. And remember that we are in this pattern, 5:12, 5:5:12. This is old hat. You know this. You're never going to forget it. We are in the sixth book of the very last column we call the Minor Prophets. Minor for length, not for importance. You know all of this already. That's old hat for you. Micah is interesting. You hear the first part of his name, Mike? That sounds like Michael, doesn't it? Except for it has a different ending than Michael. You hear the Michael name ends in L, whereas Micah ends in Yah. That's because those are abbreviations or suffixes that we tack onto the end of his name that mean different things, but the Mike part means the same. So what are we talking about? Well, Micah means who is like, and then we get to the Yah part, the Lord. Yah is short for Yahweh, Yahweh. So we talk about Yah referring to God. It's the Lord, all capitals, Yahweh. So what does Michael mean? What does Michael mean? Well, it is who is like. El means God. So we hear that word El, Samuel, Michael. That El part means God. So who is like the Lord? It's similar to the name of Michael, which means means who is like God. Where does he fit in our timeline? Well, for those of you who have your timeline, you can get out and look at the Old Testament timeline, but he is a contemporary of Isaiah. I really like that he's a contemporary of Isaiah because he is the counterpart to Isaiah's big city royal lifestyle. Remember, Isaiah served in the Persian court system and then the Babylonian courts. He was very high end. He was a part of the who's who crowd. But if that's true, then Micah is his counterpart. He's more of a country guy. I put in your handout, he's part of the who cares crowd, just the common guy. And they are contemporaries. They're living at the exact same time, but they are two very different approaches to how God is using one. Isaiah is talking about things that are very regal and very leadership-oriented, whereas Micah is really standing for the common man. He's very, very concerned about social injustice. Micah is very concerned about the average person being taken advantage of by big government and by their farms being taken. He's not afraid to name names. Micah is absolutely broken over this. I put in your handouts also, he is sick of the poor being used by the rich and powerful. I put this as a contrast. If Isaiah is the court prophet, sometimes he's referred to as the court prophet because he went into the courts of Persia and Babylon, then Micah could be called the country prophet. These are the contrasts of these two that ministered at the exact same time. So when you're reading Isaiah, keep in mind Micah would be a good book to partner with that, to see how they both approach same topics in a very, very different way. Gives us an insight on the Lord. The Lord will build people differently. You know, I hear certain pastors or teachers teaching and they focus on different things. That's their personality coming out in their study. Micah is from Moresheth. This means possession of Gath. It's kind of shorthand for that. It's a small town in southern Judah. So he's kind of from the hills, as we would say. And I also want to point out one thing. I wasn't sure where to put this in our handout, so I'm going to put it right now. And this is part of that fantastic pun system. If you have your Bibles, please turn to Micah chapter 1. I'm going to get a little bit of water here. Micah chapter 1. I'm going to show you a series of puns he does with these cities. I'll give you kind of an example in English, because remember, we're reading a translation. And the translation from Hebrew to English you don't hear the puns. But let me give you a couple examples I thought of in English. If I were writing a warning to America, I might say something like, those of you who live in Chicago, you're going to want to go, but you're not going to be able to. Or those of you who live in Los Angeles, there's not one angel in your city. Or those of you who live in Philadelphia, there is no brotherly love found. You know, if I were to say those things, that would be using the name of the city and using it as a warning of judgment. He does that to these cities. Some are similar in sounding. Some are a pun on the meanings, but let me show you those. They're from chapter 1, verses 10 through 15. He begins with, "Tell it not to Gath, weep not at all. In Beth Aphrah, roll yourself in the dust." There's two different sets of puns here. The first one is, "Tell it not to Gath." Well, the two Hebrew words for tell it and Gath sound very, very similar. So using it one pun there. The other one is, if you see the second name, Beth Aphrah. You recognize Beth from the second letter of the Hebrew alphabet. Bet, alphabet. And that means house, Bethlehem. So this means house. This particular one means house. You recognize Beth. But also it ends in Aphrah. You want to take a guess at what that means? It means dust. This is the house of dust. Look what he says again. You're in Beth Aphrah, the house of dust. You know what you're going to do? You're going to roll yourself in dust. So he's making these play on words. Verse 11, "Pass by in naked shame, you inhabitants of Shapher." And that name Shapher in the Hebrew, that means pleasant. Pleasant as in everything's going well, or you're not ashamed of anything, right? So he's saying, you're going to walk by in naked shame, those of you who live in a place where you're never used to shame. He's saying in the inhabitants of Zanon does not go out. Guess what Zanon means? It means literally going out. So you're living in a place that means going out. Guess what you're not going to be able to do? You're not going to be able to go out. But Beth Ezel, you know that name Beth already, right? And that means house, of course, and Azel means adjoining. So they're living in adjoining house or support. And you know what he says to them? They mourn. It's a place to stand is taken away from you. So your support is taken away from you. So all of these puns. The inhabitants of Moreth means bitterness. They pined for good or for things that were not bitter. But you know what they got instead? Bitterness, disaster. That's what they got. You're in a place called bitterness. You want really good things? No, you're going to stay with your name. You get bitterness from that. And you get that coming down from the Lord to the gate of Jerusalem. O inhabitants of Lachish, harness the chariot to the swift steeds. Now this in Hebrew, Lachish, sounds a lot like the Hebrew word. I'm not going to try to pronounce for you, but you can go actually click on the Strong's. On Blue Letter Bible, they'll pronounce it. This is one of those you really got to use the sound in Hebrew. And if you do that, Lachish and the Hebrew word for the chariot of horses sound very, very similar. And so he says here, the inhabitants of Lachish harnessed the chariot to the swift steeds. She was beginning the beginning of sin to the daughter of Zion. For the transgression of Israel were found in you. Verse 14, therefore you shall give presents to Moresheth Gath. Remember earlier I said Moresheth was the short form of the possession of Gath. Here's the full form. Therefore you shall give presents to Moresheth Gath. The house of Egzib shall be a lie to the kings of Israel. Egzib means lie. So that is going to be a lie to the kings of Israel. One last one. I will yet bring an heir to you, O inhabitant of Mareshah. The glory of Israel shall come to Adullam. He says, I'll bring an heir to you. Marashath means inheritance. And so he's using all of these plays on words. Very interesting. He even a couple times uses a play on his own name and what his name means, who is like the Lord. But you get the point of all of this. He's taking these names in a very clever way, is giving them warning, saying judgment is coming to you. He is very concerned about the common person. Well, this is book number 33 of 39 in the Old Testament. As you can tell, we are really winding down with this thing. This is actually the 6th book of that final section of 12. It's a really clean organization. If you look at your handout, I tried to organize this, and I tried to take a cue from Micah and get a little creative with the wording because he's such a wordsmith. Well, I want to show you this. If you have your Bible, look at this. Do you see Micah 1 and verse 2? You see how he says, "Hear all you peoples"? That indicates that he's starting his very first speech. But if you look at chapter 3 and verse 1, and he says, "And I say, hear now," that word "hear" indicates the beginning of the next speech. So we put chapters 1 and 2 together, and I aptly named that the first message to hear. Here is the indicating word that tells you it's a brand new, different section. So we put chapters 1 and 2 together as the first speech to hear. We put chapters 3 through 5 together because 3 verse 1 indicates a new section by saying, "Hear now, O heads of Jacob." And we'll see it one more time in chapters 6 and 7. Look at chapter 6. He says in verse 2, "Hear, O mountains, the Lord's complaint." And so we have these 3 very simple breakdowns in Micah, and we'll get into that in just a moment. When is this time period? Well, we are 13 years shy of the Assyrian captivity. So you're only about a decade away from Assyria coming in and taking care of the northern kingdom. Remember, we never hear from them again. They become essentially what Jesus refers to as the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And when Jesus comes in his ministry, he refers to them and said, "I came for the lost sheep of the house of Israel." And this is what he's talking about, that Assyrian captivity. And so this is 735 BC. What are the common themes here? Well, it's very simple. Micah is looking out for the common man, and he is absolutely broken over the false prophets in Israel. There was something going on in Israel. I'll just say this briefly. We'll see if we get to it. I'm going to try to read some of this. It's only 7 chapters. We'll see how far we can get. But in this, Micah also not only is sticking up for the common man, but he is absolutely calling names. He's saying, this guy does this thing. And one of the people groups he calls out is the false prophets. They are exactly what it sounds like. They are making money off of prophecy. Sound familiar? There's a whole industry with that today, leading by people like David Jeremiah. And they're saying things that are not true. I don't know that he knows they're not true. I wouldn't say his intent, but he's saying things that are erroneous in the biblical text, and he's making millions on book sales by keeping people in a constant state of watching the news to see what's next in Revelation. And they're just simply wrong. And there are people in these days that are even more overt than that. They were actually selling their services as a prophet and said, "Sure, I'll either bless you or I could curse your buddy over there that stole your tools last Friday at work. I can curse him if you want, or I could bless you however you want my services. It'll cost you." And so Micah has a section also on the false prophets that were using their ability to prophesy. Of course, it's a scam, but they're using their leverage for money. So here's some common themes. Justice for the common man. Micah, he really had the courage of a lion. He names names and calls out severely corrupt leadership. He proclaimed righteous anger against both Israel and Judah. This is one of those very interesting books that are written prior to the Assyrian captivity that talks about both the Assyrian captivity, just shy of 13 years of that, and also the Babylonian captivity, looking forward to that in 586 BC. So he actually talks about both in this one book. Another general theme is divine judgment will soon be coming to the northern kingdom of Israel, but also for the southern kingdom of Judah. Notice this in Micah 1:1. They're both listed. The word of the Lord that came to Micah of Moresheth in the days of Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah, kings of Judah, which he saw concerning, notice what it says, Samaria and Jerusalem. Samaria is the capital city of the northern kingdom of Israel, and Jerusalem is the capital city of the southern kingdom of Judah. So both the capitals there. Also, we end with this messianic hope. If you turn to chapter 5 and verse 2, there's messianic hope in here. And in fact, a ton of Micah is about Jesus. And this is the passage. You remember King Herod in Matthew, in the Gospels. King Herod says, because the wise men come and say, "Where are we late for the party? We're here to celebrate him." And Herod's like, totally biblically illiterate. Herod's like, "Who are you talking about?" No clue. And they're like, "Are we late? Are we here?" The wise men, remember from our study in Matthew, they assumed everybody was ready for this celebration. And Herod didn't know what they were talking about. So Herod goes to the scribes and to those that are being paid underneath that Roman government cheese to give him good information. And Herod goes to them and he says, "What are they talking about?" And they open up to Micah chapter 5 and verse 2, and they read this to him. They said, "But you, Bethlehem, Ephrathah," which is another name for Bethlehem. Now you know about Beth, house. Bethlehem is house of bread. Jesus is the bread of life. "But you, Bethlehem, Ephrathah, though you are little among the thousands of Judah, yet out of you shall come forth to me the one to be ruler in Israel," not Herod. They read this to him. "Whose going forth are from of old, from everlasting." This is the passage they read to King Herod. King Herod didn't take too kindly to that and decided to slaughter little newborn babies to keep this from happening. Talk about being insecure. So we have a tremendous messianic hope in Micah. He even names the city Bethlehem. I have an outline for you. I know that's a little small on the screen in person, but I have it in your paper, and I thought it would be better to have it on one page for those of you who are online. Let's go through these one at a time. As I already mentioned, let's go to chapter 1 and just see how far we get here. As already mentioned, each section begins with the word "here." So that's in 1:2, 3:1, and 6:1. That's our breakdown. So we put together those, and it looks like this. The first two chapters are one message, first message to hear. 3 through 5 are the second message to hear. And 6 and 7 are the third message to hear. Let's go ahead and read together. I have in here that chapter 1, verses 1 through 16, are judgment on various cities in Israel and Judah. We already took the time to read through the puns, so I'll go ahead and skip that part, and we'll go ahead and go to chapter 2. He says, "Woe to those who devise iniquity and work out evil on their beds. At morning light they practice it, because it is the power of their hand." There is a warning given here in chapter 2 and verse 1 to those who stay up at night and they practice and they plan for evil and wickedness. They want to do bad. They are planning to do bad, and they can't wait for the morning to carry out their plan of wickedness. Micah is calling them out, and he says to them, "They covet fields and take them by violence, also houses, and seize them. So they oppress a man in his house, a man in his inheritance." They think through as a corporation, as those who are more powerful, that have more money, how do we take their house from them? They delight in taking fields from people. They want to destroy others economically. Therefore, verse 3, "Thus says the Lord, behold, against this family I am devising disaster, from which you cannot remove your necks, nor shall you walk haughtily, for this is an evil time. In that day one shall take up a proverb against you and lament with a bitter lamentation, saying, we are utterly destroyed. He has changed the heritage of my people. How he has removed it from me. To a turncoat he has divided our fields. Therefore you will have no one to determine boundaries by lot in the assembly of the Lord." In verse number 6, if you look down at your handout, it's a judgment against these false prophets I talked about earlier. Those that are selling their services for and trying to get gain from either blessing or cursing people. They're making side deals for spiritual issues. The last couple of verses are also about Israel's restoration. Let's read this. "Do not prattle, you say to those who prophesy. So they shall not prophesy to you. They shall not return insult for insult. You who are named the house of Jacob. It is the Spirit of the Lord restricted. Are these his doings? Do not my words do good to him who walks uprightly? Lately my people have risen up as an enemy, who pull off the robe with the garment from those who trust you as they pass by like men returning from war. The women of my people you cast out from their pleasant houses. From their children you have taken away my glory. Arise and depart. For this is not your rest, because it is defiled. It shall destroy, yes, with utter destruction. If a man shall walk in a false spirit and speak a lie, saying, I will prophesy to you of wine you drank, and you would be the prattler of this people. And so he's really getting on these guys for misusing their authority. And he's really trying to stand up for those who they're abusing. Micah is really, really a bold lion for those who are being misused. If you like the little guy story, if you like those who are the bully to the bullies, that's kind of something Sarah's heard me say so many times. I feel like God has called me to be a bully to the bullies. I've always been that way. Since I was a little kid, I would always find the one kid in school that was being picked on, and I'd go right up to the person picking on and be like, really? Yeah, let's see about that. My favorite line in cinema history. I don't know if this just reveals a bad part of my life or not. I think it's a good part, but we'll pray the Lord uses it, I guess. But as I always quote, I really only know one movie really well. It's Rocky. And somebody, if you remember in the story Rocky, somebody knocks over Paulie. You remember Paulie? Adrian's brother, Paulie. Rocky kind of takes him along for the ride, but Paulie always messes everything up, and he's kind of the town drunk, but Rocky kind of keeps him under his wing. One of these great moments in cinema history, somebody knocks over Paulie, and Rocky's standing there. And Rocky goes up to him and he says, hey, you knocked him down. Now why don't you try knocking me down? It's like everything my life stands for in one. Isn't that beautiful? Isn't that beautiful? That's how I feel. It's like you find that cause for righteousness and you look right in the face of evil and you say, hey, you know what? Bring it on. Bring it on. And that's how I feel in my heart about the Lord. You want to find these people that are being taken advantage of by the wicked, and you want to stand up and say, Lord, use me as a shield to protect the innocent and be able to fight back the wicked. In chapter 3, we see the second message to hear. And in chapter 3, it's a judgment announced on the false prophets and the wicked rulers once again. He starts the second speech in chapter 3, and he says, hear now, O heads of Jacob, and you rulers of the house of Israel. Is it not for you to know justice? You who hate good and love evil, who strip the skin from my people. Now listen to the graphic description here, because you know the end of the story. The story is going to end with the last of the prophets, John the Baptist. He is going to be the one to be the forerunner of Christ. Jesus will show up on the scene, and Jesus will say, I sent my prophets to you. You killed them. I sent more prophets to you. You killed them. Then God sent his son to you. You know what he did? They killed him. Matthew chapter 21. But look at this incredible graphic description. You who hate good and love evil, who strip the skin from my people and the flesh from their bones, who also eat the flesh of my people, flay their skin from them, break their bones and chop them in pieces like meat for a pot, like flesh in the cauldron. Then they will cry to the Lord, and he will not hear them. He will even hide his face from that at that time, because they have been evil in their deeds. Thus says the Lord concerning the what? The prophets. Now here in the Old Testament, you say, wait a second, Ken, why doesn't that say false prophets? Well, it's understood in context. The words false prophets as a group, as a phrase, does not exist in the Old Testament. There were prophets that were good and prophets that were bad, and you know in context. It's not until the New Testament that we get this idea of false prophets. So this is the group right here that we see in the book of Revelation being personified as one person called the false prophet. The false prophet in the book of Revelation is a representation, a personification. It's not one person. It's not a real person. It's a personification of this big group of the unfaithfulness of Israel taking advantage of people based on spiritual status. So you have the beast, Rome, and the false prophet. That is all of this group out of covenant with God. That's all one unit in the book of Revelation that we are seeing. And so think of that when you're reading this. I also think of Matthew 23, when Jesus said at the end of Matthew 23, I wanted to gather you together as a hen gathers her chicks, but you would not. I leave to you your house desolate. Every time before that, it was my Father's house. He's talking about the temple. My Father's house, my Father's house. But no, now guess what? It's your house, Pharisees. Why? Because it's desolate. His Spirit is gone. We get to chapter 4 in the middle of this same message I have in your handout. The second message to hear. The coming Messiah, the nations and Gentiles coming to the mountain of the Lord. Fascinating chapter. It's all about Jesus, you guys. It shall come to pass in the latter days that the mountain of the house of the Lord's house, that's the temple, shall be established on the top of the mountains, and shall be exalted above the hills, and people shall flow to it. Many nations, you see it? That's Gentiles. And many nations shall come and say, come and let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob. He will teach us his ways, and we shall walk in his paths. For out of Zion the law shall go forth, and forward from the Lord from Jerusalem. You can read the rest of this. It's very, very exciting about the gathering of the nations on the mountain of the Lord one day in Israel. And that's, of course, referring to Jesus being born. Look at this incredible imagery you have in chapter 5. Finishing up the second message. Now gather yourselves in troops, a daughter of troops. He has laid siege against us. They will strike the judge of Israel with a rod on the cheek. Wow, did that happen? Yes, that happened. Jesus being struck. Look at this in verse 2. But you, Bethlehem Ephrathah, here's our verse that the wise men, that the scribes quoted. Though you are little among the thousands of Judah, yet you shall come forth to me, the one to be ruler in Israel, whose going forth are from old, from everlasting. Therefore he shall give them up until the time that she who is in labor has given birth. Remember, we talk about Jesus in the Olivet Discourse says, and these are the beginning of birth pains. Birth pains. See, Israel is likened unto a woman. And this woman is in birth pains, giving forth birth. Of what? Of Jesus Christ and his kingdom. And it's producing this kingdom through pain. I always try to tell people when we're in the Olivet Discourse, remember, in Matthew 24, Luke 21, Mark 13, Jesus is standing there. All the major teachers right now tell you this is in our future, and they're looking for this to happen. And Jesus stood on the Mount of Olives in front of his disciples, and he said to them, these events that will happen in this generation, by the way, these events are the beginning of birth pains, beginning of sorrows. I always like to say, it's not a death rattle. I've heard a death rattle. It's not a death rattle. It's a birth pain. How can you apply it to the end when it's the beginning? And so this birth pain means something is being delivered. What's being delivered? It's the kingdom through Christ. And right here it says the exact same thing. We move to our third message to hear, chapter 6 and 7. We get to our key verse in chapter 6. It's in verse number 8. He starts in 6:1. Hear now what the Lord says. Arise, plead your case before the mountains. Let the hills hear your voice. Hear, O you mountains, the Lord's complaint. And strong foundations of the earth, for the Lord has a complaint against his people, and he will contend with Israel, O my people. What have I done to you? And how have I wearied you, and testified against me? For I brought you up from the land of Egypt. I redeemed you from the house of bondage. I sent you before Moses, Aaron, and Miriam, O my people. Remember now what Balak, king of Moab, counseled, and what Balaam, the son of Beor, answered him. From Acacia Grove to the Gilgal, that you may know the righteousness of the Lord. What shall I come before the Lord and bow myself before the Most High, the High God? Shall I come before him with burnt offerings, with calves a year old? Will the Lord be pleased with 10,000 rams, 10,000 rivers of oil? Shall I give my firstborn for my transgression, the fruit of my body for the sin of my soul? Now here's the key verse in Micah, verse 8, 6:8. He has shown you, O man, what is good. What does the Lord require of you? Here's what's required. You ready? To do justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. If that verse becomes the outline of the characteristics of your life, you'll be doing all right. Here's we're called to do today: to live justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with our God. You can read through the rest of chapter 7. We get to the very final read through the rest of 6, I should say. We get to the chapter 7, the final chapter, and it is finishing up these ideas of the sorrow of the sins of Israel and finally a future promise of restoration. But I just want to focus on just a couple of thoughts here in this final chapter. I want you to notice that this restoration that's promised at the end is promised to the faithful remnant. It's so very important you understand that. Folks that don't understand that, they're lumping all of Israel together. As you can see here, that's why I wanted to go slow when he's talking about this idea in chapter 3. You've stripped the skin. There's no hope for you. You're without hope. That's talking about those that are putting their fist in God's face and they're taking advantage of people. And Micah's saying, "What are you doing? You're done. You're apart from God. You're toast." And that's what the Lord of Jesus is referencing in Matthew 23. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, you hypocrites! Woe to you! Woe to you! Woe to you! You're in trouble without the Lord. But there's a subset in ethnic Israel. In other words, the bloodline of Jacob. There's a subset in there that is what we would call saved. They're faithful. And that's the remnant that this is applying to. Look, if you would, in verse 14, 7:14. Shepherd your people with your staff, the flock of your heritage. So you got to be part of the flock of the Lord, who dwells solitarily in a woodland in the midst of Carmel. Let them feed in Bashan and Gilead as in the days of old. As in the days when you came out of the land of Egypt, I'll show them wonders. Look who will see it. The nations. There it is. That's the inheritance of Jesus. Jesus receives the Gentiles for his inheritance. The whole Bible could be summarized in this very simple sentence. It's the story of the nation, Israel, blessing the nations, the Gentiles. Abraham was the pastor of a nation, Israel, that was to bring the light of the gospel to the world. And that got realized in the person of Jesus. Jesus was in reality what Israel was to be in theory. He is the Israel of God. If you're in him, the promises of Abraham flow to you. The nations, the Gentiles got that, and they accepted him as the Messiah, ending the old covenant, ending the Judaic age. The Jewish religion ended by Jesus. I don't think a lot of Christians get that. Sarah and I were just talking about that. I said, when I was a kid, I would hear stories of martyrdom when I was little, and I thought, oh, that was hundreds of years ago. Well, folks, I'm beginning to understand I very well may be martyred for this message. And it seems like it's ramping up. Did you know most Christians today do not know that Jesus ended the Jewish religion? It's like they want it both ways. They want to be a Christian, name the name of Jesus, and then witness to their Jewish friends, and they think their Jewish friends are like mostly Christian. It doesn't work that way. You can't practice Judaism today. It's impossible. You know why? Here's a simple sentence. Judaism is a temple system. No temple, no system. And you can't just build another temple. You have to have God's blessing on that. It's over. You can't do it. It's impossible. So in chapter 7, he's promising that these faithful remnant will be the ones who will experience this forgiveness. Let me see if I can find a couple key verses here, and then we'll be through. He says here, let me see if I can find this. He does mention the remnant. I know I read it just a second ago. 18, thank you. Who is a God like you, pardoning iniquity and passing over the transgression of the remnant of his heritage? He does not retain in his anger forever, because he delights in mercy. He will again have compassion on us and will subdue our iniquities. You will cast all our sin into the depths of the sea. You will give truth to Jacob and mercy to Abraham, which you have sworn to our fathers from days of old. This is applying to those that are faithful in him. This is not just blood, samples coming back as being positive for being related to Jacob. It's those that are faithful to the covenant. So a Jew in the Old Testament has never been by blood. It's always been by faithfulness. And a Gentile can be grafted into this as well, and they can become Jewish. That's the secret. It seems like nobody's really remembering these days as they're reading their Bible. But that's an overview of the book of Micah. He is all about the little guy, and he is giving warnings to the big guys, and he is not afraid to name names and tell them exactly what's waiting for those that are choosing to take advantage of people. And he is a mighty, mighty warrior for the Lord. And I just appreciate Micah. You talk about he would be today, he would be the kind of guy that just tells it as it is and doesn't really care who supports him. He's the guy that stands up for those who need it. And I appreciate his approach and his literary devices that he uses. Very, very different from the eloquency of Isaiah, who's very educated and careful in the way he approaches topics. And Isaiah's masterful in the way he does it. He's probably the best writer in the Old Testament. But Micah's like, yeah, did you guys ever think of this? It's just boom. And I appreciate Micah for that. I hope that was a blessing to you as we make our way through the Old Testament. Hope you're seeing how all these things fit together. And we'll come back here. If you're watching live, we'll be back at 10:15 in about 20 minutes or so. And we're going to be in the second half of Exodus 14 this morning. And it is such an incredible story. So I hope you join us for that. We'll see you in just a few minutes.